Hey everyone, welcome in. We're going to hear a little bit today about the situation in Venezuela from somebody who is literally affected by this situation. This is my new friend Ty. He's going to tell us a little bit about his family and the situation that we are seeing on this side, how it affects people who are actually from and still in Venezuela. Ty, it's nice to meet you. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Ty Graff, and I was born in Venezuela. I lived in Venezuela for about 18 years. My father is from Germany. He, grew up in Germany during the World War II, and he was, on a concentration camp captured by the Russians on the Yugoslavia side. He was living in a German province. From there, my grandmother was rescued by the Red Cross and sent to Venezuela. And during the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, there were a lot of foreigners coming to Venezuela because it was a land of opportunities. So she ended up being, in Venezuela, just like many went to Brazil and Argentina and United States and other parts of the Western continent. And then, so my father stayed with his grandmother for another 10 years because there were no telling where his parents, end up at. But through some assistance, Red Cross and other agencies, he finally located my grandmother. So he came to Venezuela when he was a teenager, and eventually, went to school and met my mother, and then there I was. So I lived in Venezuela with what I consider to be the best years of Venezuela. It was, everything was booming. The economy was great. The capitalism was ruling, Venezuela. It was considered to be the wealthiest country in South America, and mostly because of the oil. They had such a small population, under 28 million, I believe, at that time. And then with the productions and economy, money generates money, and so that was great. And when I graduated from high school, I wanted to come to United States for vacation, and many Venezuelans could afford that at that time. And then I wanted to go to university in United States. And from there, I kind of enjoy being here. And I went to the University of Arizona for 1 year, and then I went to college. What happened is I was going to the U of A, and exactly at that time, the first time the money depreciated considerably. Venezuelan bolivars, which is the currency in Venezuela, for many years was between 3, 4, 5 bolivars to $1 for decades and decades. And during that year, I think it was 1988, I believe, it went from 5 to 10 to 20, and we thought that was bad. And then next thing you know, and a few months later, it went to 100. And you can imagine your dollar depreciating that much. People couldn't believe it could be that bad. Now, if you think of the currency alone, between them and now, it was not 100, it's not 200, it's like 3 million to 1. So it is cheaper to get a tissue paper than it is to get a Venezuelan note. So that's what they start printing. Yeah, first they stopped using coins, then they stopped using small bills, and they printed, they added zeros, and they took the zeros out, and they just eventually stopped using currency. And today they use the American dollar, because nothing else is worth circulating. So what else? So that's when the socialism of Chavez took power, and the socialist programs, I guess, in a way, they're very appealing to the people, especially the poor people, because obviously you're going to give them something, and although a lot of the Venezuelans were doing well, it separated the people that were striving to have stuff and do business with the people that not necessarily did as much. So socialism appeals to that, and many social programs could probably work, but I believe was the greed, the bad influence that once take over, socialist programs, corruption like you hear happens in the United States. Well, that is magnifying 100 times, 1,000,000 times. So when you have, you can get your hands into the pot, say, why not take a little? Why not take more? And then I guess you want me to go into what I think it happens.
Sure.
What happens is, one, Chavez was advertising all the social programs, and they were great. They were going to be free medicine, housing and transportations and all this process to lower costs and to improve the quality of life for the Venezuelan people. And then his head had got much bigger, more ambitious, and he thought that companies like Ford Motor Company, Exxon, Chevron, General Motors, all those companies were stealing, resources from Venezuela, which I disagree, because I think that business generates business, and if you have a company doing business with people who's not obligated to buy their product, they buy it because they enjoy it, then it generates, stimulates the economy. So, but he thought it was that those companies were robbing the Venezuelan people. So he thought that everything needed to be nationalized, starting with the oil. So he nationalized a lot of the things in Venezuela, the gas stations, the oil, and businesses. He back then you can see on TV where he used to walk around and say, who owns that business? And that is so and so. It's like expropriated. Like you close it down, or you're taking them out of business. And the idea is to, let's say, for example, the National Bank is run by, United States. So you take it out of that ownership, and you make a Venezuelan to own that business. So the many business owners, perhaps residents, perhaps citizens, they were affected by it. And a lot of the major production, the coffee producing company, the banana producing company, the beans, all those were extradited or stole from their ownership. Farms, they're taken away by the government, and those people ran away. They just took whatever they could, they sold whatever it could, and that kind of started have a domino effect on the economy. And so he thought it was good, because now he controlled that system. He can control the prices. I was told he would go into a business and ask how much they were selling certain merchandise. Let's say TV, for example. They say, well, that sells for $500, $600. And he said, no, that shouldn't cost more than $200. So you'll sell it for $200. And the business say, I can sell it for $200 when I buy for $3. I'm trying to make $100 out of it. So he will, expropriate that business and run it under the government, stuff. So what happened is, when you sell a product, you can no longer buy substitute products, because it will cost you more. So now imports and export are affected. And little by little, all the merchandise, everything went out. There's no food, there's no medicine, there's no tables, there's no beds, there's no TVs, there's nothing, because the businessman can't sell it at the government request a price, especially when simultaneously your currency goes down. So you got to generate more profit and then run to buy merchandise and bring it in. So it's like, impossible. It is just they go into it. I don't know where they go to school, but it just makes no sense. So, year by year, it just gets worse and worse. And then the government is trying to replace all those programs that are failing with more incentive, and it just doesn't work. And you get to the point that there's nothing. You can see some of the videos that the grocery stores, the shelves are completely empty. The only way you can find, let's say, for example, vegetable oil, is there is no competition, there is no import, so the government will buy a lot from Brazil, and that will be one shelf with one type size oil, and that's what you get. There's no choices, there is no competition, and you multiply that to all the merchandise in the store is really minimal, and it's there, and the costs continue to go up.
So
devastating.
Man, I could not have asked for a better history lesson as far as up to communism, or up to socialism. So fast forward to recently, you said that life is that way in Venezuela. What is it like for your family, and what is it like for you being here, knowing what's going on there?
So I believe there's two main groups or sides to the story and what happened in Venezuela. So you hear from the majority of people, including my family, that the situation is bad, the economy is bad. There's especially those people that lived during the great years, and how it affects their income, their production, and where do I find my next dollar to buy whatever I need to buy. and then you hear about, or you see some of the revolution, the Chavez, supporters, they eagerly, think that it's great, that things are functioning and the streets are clean and some businesses are working. So it's kind of hard to understand those two sides, and it's so, polarized. It's like, how can it be so bad and how can it be so well for you, for your own thing? So they say that the most people that are doing well is because somehow they're connected to the government, and the people in the rest of the country is bad. What I want people to consider, to imagine, you're talking about from the American point of view that doesn't know more about it. I just want them to imagine what would cause millions of people to abandon their home, leave behind their families, everything they own, everything they knew. Millions of people leave the country with nothing. Many of them don't even have a suitcase, or just whatever they can carry in their backpack, and their kids or their spouse, or go on their own if they're lucky enough or young enough to go on themselves. Others take their families with them, their immediate family. What would drive you to do that in the millions, with no guarantees you're going to be doing better anywhere else, just hoping that you think that anywhere else has to be better than Venezuela? So I think for those that say that Venezuela is not that bad, or just see some of the people chanting Maduro is great, Chavez is great, I just don't see that to be possible when you have millions of cases, doing that. You say, I don't know.
I'd like to, yes, I appreciate your insight there, but in this particular instance, you mentioned millions of people leaving. I want to make sure we paint a even picture here, and you mentioned that there are people who agree and believe that this is that this is the right way to run the country.
Right.
But now the U.S. has gone in and they've captured the communist dictator, and so what do you feel like the majority of Venezuelans feel about that decision, how it went down, what the ramifications are going forward?
Okay, so going back to, or starting with where I left behind. So you got all these millions of people behind. Many, or few, however, no, would like to stay where they are. They think that they're doing good, but many millions, would think they would like to go back what they think it was better. I think that in Venezuela, the people lost trust. You lost trust in the political systems. They lost their trust in their local police, department. They lost trust in the army forces. They lost trust in the government. When they don't feel like the government is listening to their needs, and then they cannot rebel against it, or they cannot just freely try to make a change, because they have all this. Throughout the years, the government has able to eliminate the right to bear arms. They eliminate public expression. They cannot talk bad about the government because they could be put in jail. They don't have the right to have judicial representation, a fair representation in the judicial court. They can be put in jail for years before you find out what your charges are, just because you're talking bad about the government. So that, I think, is very detrimental. So the people that are not protesting, they're not outside, is because they have fear of what could happen. I believe that, like it or not, what Donald Trump did by taking Maduro out of power is that you're taking the big snake out of the snake pit, but the entire government, the regime is still there. So people is afraid to go out and express themselves. You could have, in a free society, a free country, you will have people on one side cheering, the other one's not. But and that's not what happened. The majority is like, I don't know what's going to happen if I go in there. And so I think that's the situation right now. Is like many are happy because they think this is the end to the socialist regimen, and they can see, well, we perhaps go back to the days that capitalism, perhaps,
right.
The days when things were better. But I think the problem right now is like you took Maduro and they have these charges against him, but what does it does to the political, right. the current political
right, the vacuum
party
of power
running.
Somebody's going to try to,
because the army is still run by the same people. The police want to still have the same captains and generals and everybody else.
Right.
So how is that changed from then to that? So I find it difficult. The same, and for the same, in the same, part. I think it's difficult for any country, Donald Trump or anyone else trying to help Venezuela without having some kind of representation locally to help carry out those measures, the strategy or whatever it is that we're planning to do. So we depend on Venezuela to basically, and the people in power, whichever those people in power happens to be, to make those changes and trying to improve the situation in Venezuela.
So who do you think is going to improve the situation? Do you think the U.S. will improve the situation? Do you think that they can work with the people of Venezuela and like make things better? I don't want to say like oust this group
Right.
or whatever, but like whatever the people of Venezuela want. Do you think that this is something that the U.S. is going to help, or do you just think this is an oil grab? What do you think the real situation is?
Okay. I think the Venezuelan natural resources definitely play a big role on this one. But also I think the United States strategy, for what I hear, it makes sense. If you ever think about, global economies and global powers, if you don't take care of your backyard, then you're subject to, to have bad things come into it. So the way we are understanding is that Venezuelan could not, extract the oil that they were extracting before. They cannot process or refine the oil that they get in. So little by little, that even though you have all this, largest reserve in the world, you cannot extract them or process them or export them as they could. And because they are totally against what they call capitalist powers, Germany, England, France, Belgium, United States, you name it, anything that is on the right side, they were against it. And so the only help they have is from Iran and Afghanistan, definitely China and Russia. So those, I believe that side was taking advantage of Venezuela. They're buying the crude oil and making deals, perhaps, who knows what kind of deal they're making with the government, in order to the government to get some kind of income to maintain the social programs. But that could be good if they were getting enough.
Right.
But obviously history, tells you that wasn't enough, because the country could go on into further depression, further inflation, and the depreciation of the coin. So whatever was happening, it wasn't happening. So it tells me that they were taking advantage of Venezuela. So I think that by removing or trying to put sanctions in Venezuela, and you take care of the continent itself, take advantage of the Venezuelan not able to support or benefit those governments, and instead benefit the United States. I think it's great. I think it has to do a lot with the oil. I don't think we would have done the same thing for any other country unless we had that much to get from it. But I think it's a good thing, because it doesn't matter how much United States benefit out of it. If you're benefiting the Venezuelan economy, if you benefit the Venezuelan people, and they have to have freedom, they have elections, and they be able to select their representative at the local and national level,
Right.
That is great.
Right. So it's not, in your opinion, like a lesser of two evils. It's not, we're under this regime and we're working with China and Russia, or we're working with the U.S. It's just what's better for the people of Venezuela.
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
I think
I'm a bit, probably one-sided, because I lived in Venezuela when it was great, and I left by choice, and we were able to afford certain things. And then, it's not my opinion. I mean, the history shows that Venezuela went from being the richest, country in South America to the poorest. So something is obviously wrong.
Right.
So if we can change it and somehow, bring it back to to that system, I think it's an improvement.
Well, I'm glad to hear that the people do feel a little bit of confidence. It seems that things might get better, or at least they have a chance to get better.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to kind of get an idea how people felt, and I did wonder if there were people behind closed doors saying this is what we needed.
Right.
I don't know how the things went down, or how who's getting what out of the deal, but I do hope that it is something that's a positive for the people of Venezuela. Do you feel like it's a net positive for everybody there right now, that they feel a little bit of hope?
Well, yes, definitely yes. I think it's regardless what side of the defense they are, I think they probably feel that there is an opportunity for changes. And once it has been so bad, I think the idea that it could be different is just gonna point in one direction, which will be the improvement. I'm hoping that it does come true, for everyone. I don't know how can you make the current regime, I guess I'd say, gonna realize the opportunities they have, and how are they gonna blend in with the country that it seems to be so separated between
Right.
the oppressed and the ones that can think that they things are going well, but I think it's a chance for for changes and better things to happen.
Right. Well, I obviously we hope for the best for people and not to be oppressed and not to be in a negative situation. Ty, it's
Right.
nice to meet you. Thank you so much for giving me this insight and this information. We hope to hear from some other folks and just kind of paint a good picture of what's going on in Venezuela and how it affects the United States and the people of here and there. So thank
Yeah.
you for your time.